Join us as we dive into the extraordinary journey of Mark Bartel, from a high flying career in New York City to revolutionizing small businesses with AI, uncovering how personal philosophies and cutting edge technology converge to shape the future of entrepreneurship. So, Mark, you've transitioned from a promising career in New York City to the uncertain path of entrepreneurship. What was a pivotal moment for you, and how did it feel like stepping into the unknown, leaving behind what many would call the perfect life?
I think there was a handful of moments and they built upon each other one after the other. I think when I graduated university, I told myself I'll probably be in corporate for say 2 to 4 years, but I'd done entrepreneurship types of things when I was in undergrad and later in grad school as well. But that ended up being more or less accurate. I think I was in corporate for almost 2 years to the day. I think I got my job offer. Today's Valentine's Day. I got my job offer exactly 5 years ago, actually. But yeah, it was one of those things that I think I accidentally planned really well. And I think the motivations for doing that ended up coming later along. Like one of my buddies, he's a very close friend of mine now, but he talked about as you go through your corporate job, you're going to see a lot of value that you can provide, and you'll start to wonder if that value is being properly placed in your corporate setting. And that I definitely started to notice that during COVID, and we'll probably talk about this later on. But I started watching a lot of my peers and mentors who were running businesses, and maybe it was restaurants or mom and pop stores or their own little startups, getting tossed back and forth with COVID, the lockdowns, restrictions, all that stuff. And that really got me wondering, is working with all these huge firms the best use of my skills, or is there a more fulfilling avenue that I can be using these on? So I think it was just summarize all that. It was a handful of multiple moments. And I know we'll talk about this later as well. I think the defining moment when I decided I need to make a change was when Chadwick Boseman passed away. Yeah, I think August of 2020 was what it was.
Thank you very much for sharing that story with me. I think a lot of the time, act- I've actually read online about how people have been coaching others that what they should do is transition the skills that and value that they give to their corporate jobs, and then put that online, and then see if that would be more fulfilling. And I feel like you have done that very successfully. And I think it's actually not easy to do that, because it's actually not straightforward at all. You see it in the media.
Mhm.
But how did you find that the difference between like probably what you thought it would be to start a business and what it actually was like?
I think figuring out what to do was relatively straightforward because my job in corporate, I was working my official title was, I think, project manager or something of the sort, but the functional role was internal sales consultant. So I would work with all these really well-established teams who were selling services to Fortune 50s, Fortune 10 companies. And I'd go to these sales teams who'd been selling for 15, 20, 25 years, been selling to the same company. And I would have to somehow convince them to take me seriously. And as a trained engineer, I didn't have any sales experience. I had an academic knowledge of marketing from my classes, but I didn't have I hadn't cut my teeth in any capacity. And I very quickly found that the gap that a lot of these teams had was their data, their automations, and all those different processes. So as soon as I started looking under the hood of their Excel sheets and their CRMs and all that stuff, and I said, have you guys ever thought about connecting this to that or that to this or analyzing this data that way? They're like, no, we've never thought about that. So that was how I was able to very quickly add value to the teams, get them to take me seriously. And by the time I left, a lot of them would sit there and ask me, Mark, you're leaving. Who's gonna analyze our data? Who's gonna build a system that we've come to depend on for the last 18 months? So for myself, it was taking those skills that I'd seen the fruits of in a corporate setting and applying it to a different context. The challenge was learning how to adjust the rest of the business model to that. Because I don't know if you've ever read the E-Myth Revisited. Not sure what it was written. I want to say early 2000s, but it talks about how business owners who are really skilled at something, they'll start running a business in that thing. Say you're a baker or a welder or a graphic designer or something. 6 months in, you start to really hate that thing that you used to love because there's all these other skills that you have to master that come with running a business. And actually doing what you enjoy doing is just a small fraction of your day-to-day life. So for me, figuring out the other skills of building a business has been the biggest challenge, and just fitting the automations and the designs and tech stuff that I do into that, that's been the easy part, honestly. I think, yeah, building around it has been the hard part.
Definitely. Yeah, I really liked what you said about how you were able to directly transition those skills because it really seems like you were in quite a non-technical team and you were the technical person. And then you saw a lot of
Mhm.
problems that other people did not see. And I think that's incredibly valuable because you can very easily transition this for small businesses like the target market that you currently have now.
Mhm. Definitely.
So, your journey from pre med to AI is nothing short of remarkable. Can you share how a transformative internship pivoted your career towards technology and its impact on businesses? Perhaps a moment of realization that was your true calling.
I think for myself, so the transformative internship is actually with my church here in the States. And the challenge that I was trying to wrestle through was what was motivating my career and my aspirations for the future. Like I've always been a very relational person, and that very much dictates how I do business now because I have the freedom to make that call. But at the time when that internship took place, I was pre-medical, as you mentioned. And the reason for that was I thought that's the best way to build relationships quickly with people. It's also the best way to see the world because the laws change with borders, the economy changes with borders, but the laws of science and physiology, that's constant throughout the globe. So I saw that as something consistent that I could depend upon and eventually do something like Doctors Without Borders and travel working in villages and all that types of stuff. And that was a path to doing what I wanted to do. But as I started exploring more in this particular internship with the church that I was doing, it involved a little bit of charity work, involved things that I would not have otherwise considered doing, honestly. But just once I decided to do it, it was almost like taking a bit of a leap into the unknown. And 6 months, 6 to 8-ish weeks, once that was all done, I realized that was one of the most impactful risks that I'd ever taken because it gave me a much greater desire to see the world. Before that, I didn't really know where I wanted to end up geographically. I also met one of my best friends and future roommates on that internship as well. So when I reflected on that and thought, how rewarding was this to take a leap of faith and go deviate from the standard plan of the path that I had for my life? What would it look like if I carried that same level of flexibility with other opportunities and potentially even with my career? And as I began to think through that, I came to realize, why am I leaning towards medicine? I am leaning towards medicine, yes, because of all those things I mentioned earlier, but also because it was a very conventionally stable path. Like doctors are never going to be, you're never going to see a doctor outside with a "will work for whatever" sign. These guys are getting job offers from every hospital on the planet. So when I realized a lot of the things I was looking to find in medicine could be acquired elsewhere with different risks that I had to factor in, I realized the fulfilling thing that I thought would come later on in my career that I was ultimately aiming for. You got to do 10, 12 years of med school. You got to establish yourself, build a family, all that stuff. And then I could, in theory, do the things that I was thinking about doing. All those things could be acquired much faster. And I could see the fruits of that and experience the life that entailed much faster as well if I just pivoted away from medicine and started looking at other alternatives.
I really like the approach that you had towards finding your true calling, because a lot of people think that they should focus on the thing that they're currently focusing on more, right? But I think the fact that you took
Mhm.
this really interdisciplinary kind of perspective and you took an internship at the church, and I feel like that makes you become more open-minded and like more flexible towards your approach, which like
Mhm.
kind of transition to you to where you are today. Because yeah, I think that's very valuable.
Mhm. Yeah, 100%. And that open-mindedness has, I can see even in the business within the last couple of years as I've run it, where adhering to that or not adhering to that has paid off and yielded fruits like beyond what I could have anticipated. Like some of the most unique and interesting partnerships that I've come across within my business have been from completely outlandish proposals. Maybe they were poorly written. Maybe the person was, I met him completely randomly, thought he was really sketchy at first. And granted, there's an element of trusting her there, but yeah, just being open minded to new opportunities, new partnerships, all those types of things. And whenever I sit down and think, okay, should I take this thing? What decisions have I made that have gotten me up until this point? What was the philosophy I made to get me there? And how would that philosophy help me in this situation?
I love that philosophy. So, for our listeners, especially for the non technical founders, could you explain in simple terms how chatbots and automation can revolutionize business operations and customer interactions?
So the simplest way to put it, these are two different answers for chatbots and automations. I'll do automations first because those are for sure in my mind based off some projects I just finished. Automations give you a lot of your time back. So, for example, I built a system out for a client a couple weeks ago. Their hiring process would take 10 plus hours, excluding interviews. And when you factor in the interviews, then you got even more time. You got more money poured into that. So we built pretty simple system in something like Airtable, and you have your columns interviewed, applied, waitlist, job offer declined, person declined, etc. And for this one, it was pretty simple. You just click and drag the applicant from one column to the next. And as they get dragged from one to the other, it triggers emails, it triggers notifications, it sends them calendar invites, all those types of things that you otherwise have to do manually. And for a small mom and pop store, it's really good to have those in place initially because it helps you scale much faster when you need it. For those really big companies, that's a game changer in how they approach their hiring process, because all these action items that they would otherwise spend hours doing on a weekly basis gets completely taken off the table. So the fascinating thing about automation, and we'll probably talk about this more later, is most people don't realize just how much stuff can be automated. And when you realize how many things you're doing on a day-to-day basis that you, quite frankly, don't need to be doing, it frees you up to do the parts of your business that you enjoy and that require a lot more critical thinking and actually demand your skill sets and your expertise. So that's the automation side. Chatbots, chatbots have got a bad rap over the last couple years because most of them are designed in the corner. It's some random photocopied image of some woman with a headset asking if she can help you. And there's usually 5 or 6 predefined questions. Maybe one of them is, what's your contact number, which most people click on anyway. There's, when's my parcel going to get here? You can do a lot with these things. And the way that I built them out for my clients is we try to make an omni-channel marketing system. So you have that chatbot, but that also links to Facebook, that links to Instagram, that can link to WhatsApp, that links to your email, that links to all those other automations that I just described 2 minutes ago. So it becomes a component of your business that allows everything to be much more uniform. So your customer experience is synchronized across all the platforms, but you can also, really boiling it down, chatbots are like email campaigns, but it's a two-way conversation. Instead of doing a sales campaign where you send 5 to 10 emails and you just plaster content on their page and you'll see a conversion rate, and maybe you'll figure out eventually why someone dropped out of email 5 or 6. But when you're going through a conversation, you can really drill down to the sentences themselves and figure out what wording turns somebody off or what option did I give. So if you're asking somebody, hey, I've got this deal, does it sound good? You can say yes, absolutely, or no, not really. And if they say no, not really, then it's the deal. Otherwise, you can use these little psychological tricks along the way to keep them engaged within the flow. And Facebook specifically has this rule where you can't do this for more than 24 hours, but you can follow up with these guys, with anyone in your funnel up to those 24 hours later. So if somebody just opts out, maybe they got bored, maybe they had to go to dinner, got distracted, maybe they were texting and driving and realized they shouldn't be doing that. You name it. But you can follow up 3, 6, 12 hours later and pull them back into the conversation that you otherwise would have lost them on a platform that doesn't allow you to engage with them.
I really like what you said for automation about how it frees up time, because I don't think many people realize how much time they've been wasting on something that could very easily be automated, like what you said with uh, onboarding, and also what you said about chatbots. I think this also is very useful, especially because optimizing interaction with customers is something that's very difficult to do in other processes that are not very back and forth. What you said is like email, where you can actually have a reply. And also, yeah, I think people underestimate the amount of psychology that could be used to keep people
hmm
engaged and continue to reply to you and get into your funnel.
hmm I think that's just a symptom of tech people being tech people, honestly. Like psychology and marketing, it's very often, it's not logical at all, quite frankly. And so my undergrad was in bioengineering specifically. My master's was in engineering management. And that's basically like the applying engineering and engineering principles and concepts to the business side of an organization. The idea being there are God knows how many different interesting technology ideas that just never got off the ground because they were not marketed properly, because they did not adhere to the laws of psychology, all those types of things. And having worked with a ton of various entrepreneurs over the years, some of which have very strong tech backgrounds, others don't. And also having been trained as an engineer, I can tell you that a lot of engineers just are not trained by their discipline to think like marketers. So if you can incorporate marketing principles and psychology into your technology, then that's how you win, basically. That's how your business scales.
Definitely. I completely agree. I feel like um, success in tech requires both like the non-technical skills of human psychology and also technical skills, which, yeah, which you are adding to mainly the non-technical people that you work with.
Mhm.
So reflecting on Chadwick Boseman's passing and the introspection it triggered, how has this influenced your approach to AI, technology, and life?
I think so. When Chadwick Boseman passed away, I had been toying with the idea of quitting for, I think, a couple months up until this point. And a couple things around that time. And part of this was also during the peak of COVID. And I had a friend of mine, she was about to lose her immigration status in America. She was moving to Canada because in a past life, she'd acquired Canadian PR. And being a Canadian citizen and a US green card holder at the time, I had the unique ability to cross the US Canada border when it was otherwise closed to anybody else. I helped her move up there. I took a road trip to Quebec and Montreal. If you're ever in Canada, that's the best part of Canada. I said what I said, Canadians. But we were doing this road trip and I was just really reflecting on where my life was going. If I was happy on my journey, if I was using my skills properly, as we talked about. And I had a pretty good relationship with my boss. The first year was choppy, summarizing a lot in that sentence, but the second year was really smooth sailing. And I was just starting to get into the groove with him. I'd figured out his leadership style and I started thinking about what would I be giving up and what would I be acquiring if I took the leap. And I had a conversation with a friend of mine. He'd been working for Deloitte. He was one of the most accomplished people I met when I was in undergrad. And he was doing his own machine learning startup or something like that. I believe he's still doing it. And we hopped on a call and I said, I'm thinking about the switch. What do you think? And I told him my biggest fear is failing. And he said, no, Mark, your fear is not failing. Your fear is never trying. Your fear is waking up when you're in your 50s or maybe even your 60s. You've got a wife and kids, you played it safe, and you wake up and realize, oh my God, I was supposed to shoot my shot. I was supposed to try building this company. What happened? And now the best time to do it is past it. And now this isn't to say that you can't start companies later on in life because, Colonel Sanders did that. People have this bandwidth when the life circumstances definitely favor it. And for myself, yeah, that really shook me because I realized he's exactly right. I thought and I realized of the two options, would I be more happy with myself if I tried and failed the company or if I played it safe and stayed where I was and wondered what could have been? And I realized it was a very clear answer, what that answer was. I was on that road trip. I remember checking my phone and getting a tweet, just a Google notification or something that said, Chadwick Boseman, a esteemed Marvel actor, passed away at 43 of stomach cancer. And that rocked me because nobody had talked about it. He hadn't really publicized it. It's really fascinating looking back on it because he was really starting to lose weight towards the end. And a lot of people teased him for it and made fun of him. Oh, he's losing so much weight, needs to eat more burgers or something. So listen, you just teased a cancer victim. Yeah, congratulations, dude. Hope you feel good about yourself. But he gave this speech at a graduation ceremony. My sister sent this to me. And this was what did it for me. I think this was the pivotal moment when I decided this is no longer hypothetical. This needed to happen. So he gave this speech at some alma mater. And he said, when I die, I want to look God in the face and say, I did everything I could do for you. Every ounce of blood, sweat, tears. I left nothing on the table and I left no skill untapped. I took advantage of every opportunity that I was given. And now here I am. And I asked myself, if I died tomorrow, could I say I've used my time on this earth? Could I say I was happy with the choices that I made? And to a certain extent, I'd made good choices. I'd made safe choices, but were they necessarily choices that I was proud of in a sense of, oh, this was a risky move and it paid off? No, I hadn't really made, aside from deviating from pre-med, that was the biggest risky move I'd made up until that point. But when I thought through college, grad school, I got into a handful of undergrad schools, but for what I was studying, it was a no-brainer which school to take. So it's one path there. I only applied to one grad school, only applied to Duke, and I got in. I only received one job offer before, terminating only got one job offer before terminating all this. So all the steps, there was never an X or Y type of path that I had to make up until this point. So when I factored all of that in, I realized I almost feel like I have a moral obligation to see this through. I have a moral obligation to at least give this a try and see how this could change my life and the lives of people that I don't even know yet. Yeah. How that approaches AI and technology, as I think through why I do my business, as I think through a lot of the noise specifically with AI, and I swear to God, Benita, if I see one more article or YouTube video of some guy saying, here's how you earn $500 a day on ChatGPT, I'm so tired of seeing that stuff. Yeah. So I believe I have an obligation to teach people how to use this technology because ChatGPT in particular, most people see it as a really cool party trick. Oh, cool. It can write a poem about underground butterflies or something, you name it, and they'll write a poem about it. But there's practical uses for your business if you leverage these tools properly. And again, most people just don't realize that because it's not really taught. So taking all that and thinking, okay, what do I want to do for my clients? How can I make sure that they're using this stuff properly and they don't get left behind? And also thinking back to way back in 2020, when I watched some of my peers and my mentors' companies get pushed around by COVID, it's okay. How can we future-proof my clients' businesses so they're at least prepared with the tools to weather storms like that again in the future? So yeah, Chadwick Boseman's fasting, all that stuff, it links through everything in some capacity or another.
I think that was a really impactful story. And I think it really shows how you've decided to choose a life that was with you making sure you live to your utmost capacity and making sure that you are able to use your skills and help these businesses optimize their processes. And also what you said about ChatGPT, like it's very true because a lot of people just think, oh, it's ChatGPT. Like, why would I need someone else to tell me how to use it? It's so straightforward. It's just chatting. But actually there's a way to talk to it and to get what you want that is actually useful and not just, hey, write me something Shakespearean. Hey, make this email like Shakespeare wrote it. And yeah, I really like what you said about that.
Mm.
So moving on to you've created the ultimate ChatGPT formula, offering invaluable insights. Could you share a key takeaway or two that could help non-technical audience harness the power of AI for their ventures?
Yeah. So for listeners' context, I spent the first half of 2023 fielding more questions than I could realistically answer about ChatGPT and how to use it. So I created a course, ultimatechatgptmaster.com. That's not necessarily a plug because I'm not running the course right now. But the biggest takeaway from that is, weirdly enough, the people who specialize in using ChatGPT, who figured out the fastest, are not the techie people. It's actually the communications people who know how to speak, who know how to communicate their thoughts. And yes, there's an element of refining and tweaking and chain prompting and all those types of things that comes into it. But that can be taught. Those who grasp it the fastest and get the best results out of it are the ones who understand how to ask questions in a way that's structured well enough to ascertain. I'm sure you've, especially in the beginning stages of ChatGPT, you could ask it for a prompt or something and you give it 5 or 6 parameters. It would often just miss one of the parameters, like straight up. And not a lot with AI tools, specifically the graphics ones nowadays. But those who can recognize that and not just chop it up to, oh, it's a new tool, I'll just take with what I have. Specifically when it comes to leveraging this tool to build assets for your brand, making sure it sounds like your brand, making sure it's consistent with your voice. That's the biggest differentiating factor between those who use it properly and those who try it, play around with it, and then give up. Like I got a friend based out of Europe, and when I first told her I was running this course, she was like, why? You don't need to make a whole course on ChatGPT. ChatGPT's like my slave. I tell it to do something and it does it. And that was her take on it. So I had my first batch of students and they went from, a lot of these guys were boomers, like boomer age businesses. Their CRM was like a Google Excel sheet and their most complex tool was Gmail or something. So being able to take those guys from where they were to having them consistently crank out useful prompts, useful requests that were consistent with their branding voice, that was really good feedback that I should keep doing this. And also that this can be taught. And there's a difference between, again, those who know technology and come with a predefined idea of how it works versus those who don't. Like the fascinating thing about ChatGPT as a whole is so we look at software and we look at ChatGPT and we say it's a software. That's technically true, but software is programmed to give you the same response as many times as you put the inputs in. So input A will always give you output B until the world ends. That's going to be how it is. You'll put that same input in ChatGPT, and assuming it's not like a really simple thing, like what's the capital of Canada or something, you can only say it's Ottawa in so many different ways. But as long as it requires a bit of dynamic thought, it's going to give you a different answer every time, which makes it a lot more artistic than technological in nature. Once I figured that out, That completely changed how I taught it, how I approached it for my business, for my clients' businesses, and the results were considerably different as well.
Definitely. I really like what you said about how to make ChatGPT reflect your branding voice, because I think a lot of people are happy, like, wow, like ChatGPT, cool. Now I don't need to write my own content. And then they all have this very similar sounding
Mm.
captions. And yeah, and it's just a bit of a shame because it can sound a lot better.
Oh yeah. And you get to a point once you've seen enough chat GPT stuff, and I'm sure you've seen this in the tech space, you get a feel for what was written by chat GPT. You'll look at a blog post, you'll look at an email like, oh yeah, this guy just copy and paste off chat GPT. Didn't edit it and didn't tweak it, just copy paste and then he's done. Yeah, it gets pretty obvious once you've seen enough of these things, who's using it properly and who isn't.
Definitely. Overcoming misconceptions about AI among SMBs is a challenge. From your experience, what are some common myths that you've encountered and how do you address it?
And the biggest one, well, there's two. The biggest one for AI specifically is, I think, so you have these journalists who are writing all their slam piece op-eds, and there's so much noise and data about AI. Like on one hand, AI is going to solve every problem. It's going to resurrect your grandmother. It's going to bring about world peace, and it's going to grow food from plastic particles, but it will somehow still be nutritious. You have those crowds. On the other crowd, you have tomorrow's judgment day. Skynet's upon us. Get ready. The world's ending. Civil war is happening because of AI. Get your guns. This is an American thing. I'll be fully honest. Get your guns, get your basement, get your perishable goods, and just hope that tomorrow still comes, basically. And the more in between there is the real truth about AI. And there's this debate about AI sentience. I have mixed thoughts on it. Like, I think there was one Google engineer who got fired for claiming that his AI bot was sentient or something. It's lad sucked. I don't know what I would have done in that situation. But like, a lot of these people write articles specifically about how this bot resisted us and told us it hated us. Therefore, we're concerned about the ethics of AI. And it's like, if you look at the internet, which these models are trained on, there's a lot of hate speech on the internet. There's a lot of racism. There's a lot of the dredges in the bottom. You're scraping the bottom barrel of humanity and putting it on the internet. And that's the kind of stuff that these models are getting trained on. So my personal belief is these tools are not sentient. They're just producing content based off what they've been trained to see. And yes, you can draw filters around that and all those types of things. And I'm sure there's people who will disagree with this. And we can have that conversation. That's fine. But I think AI is programmed to do certain things. And granted, this stuff is growing really fast. And there's a lot of discussions about universal basic income and all those types of things. And those are definitely conversations worth discussing. But I think there's so many notions and arguments about AI that it's really going to be what you make of it. If you believe, and this kind of goes back to pretty much anything in life, honestly, but if you believe it's going to wreck your business, so you just cower a corner and wait for the droids to take over, your business isn't going to benefit from it and you will eventually go out of business. If you choose to leverage it properly, then you will be able to stay ahead and continue being a successful business. One of my mentors, he put it really concisely. He said, AI is not going to take your business. People who know how to use AI is going to take your business. And there's use cases of VAs and all these things being trained in these AI tools so they can scale their processes for their own businesses much faster. So that's AI specifically. And the second one kind of ties to, I'm tying it to AI because most people treat them synonymously, even though they are different, is automations. Like, I've had projects make it to 5 feet before the finish line, and they just get flatlined by a virtual assistant overseas because, like, we'll go through the proposal, we'll draft up a really complex automation process about how this is going to save them this much time, how they can do all these other things. And then I'll send the contract to the client to be signed and nothing will happen. And I'll call him a week, 2 weeks later, and I'll say, "Hey, is everything okay?" And he'll say, "Yeah, my VAs don't want to do this. They tell me that we don't need automations, that they can do it themselves." And at the end of the day, I think they're just scared of losing their jobs, which is not the case. But this particular business owner was not one who wanted to stonewall or steamroll, if you will, his employees. So he just basically rolled over and let them do it. And I was like, I can't do anything there. I'm not gonna fight your VAs on this. You pick your battles. This is not a battle I'm willing to fight. But the misconception there is, again, AI is going to replace your job. Automations are going to replace your job. It will replace certain parts of your job. But what I tell people who think this way is you hired your employees because they have functioning brains. Hopefully they have
Yeah.
goals, they have intelligence, and they have skills that a computer cannot do. You've probably given them a decent amount of work that is below their capacity to do. So if you use these automations to do that stuff, you are giving yourself full access to what they are completely capable of that you might not have even thought of yet. Sure, your VA's running emails, your VA's putting stuff on your calendar. Or if you could automate that and have her do graphic design, have him do something else that requires more creative input. Like one of my best sales guys is a pretty solid thinker in terms of systems and structures. So I've been working on automating as many of his processes as I can and giving him a couple automations to toy with, both for my business as well as some ideas for new projects with clients. So to summarize all of that, I'd say the misconception is AI will and automations will put virtual assistants and those things out of business. I say no. If anything, it gives you a greater chance to shine and make you even more invaluable in your employee. Hey, I
Hi.
think I lost you.
It's all right. It's all right. We were on talking about how one of your sales is a solid thinker.
Okay. So one of my sales guys is a really solid systems guy. Like he just naturally thinks in that way as well. And that's not something I anticipated when I hired him. So while he does a great job selling stuff, a big portion of our one-on-ones is him suggesting, "Hey, Mark, this is a process that takes a lot of my time. Can we do something about it?" I'm like, "Let me think about it." And then I'll come up with some automation to streamline his business so he can book more calls, he can close more deals. And as we've evolved like that, I'm able to take some of those ideas and implement them on other projects, as well as give him his own little small corner that's, going to be growing in the future of automations that he can be building and he can be at least suggesting to implement. I don't know if I said this before or after, but yeah, the biggest misconception there is AI is going to replace the VAs and people who do that admin work. And quite frankly, I would argue leveraging these tools to free up your time and the time of your employees gives you the chance to make them even more invaluable to your brand. Because yes, anybody can book calendar appointments, anybody can answer emails, anybody can do all those types of things. But when that's taken care of, you are giving and granted, you also have to plan this and figure out what exactly they're doing, what you're going to do with that time you've given them back. But once you see the thing that they uniquely specialize in, they can play much more pivotal roles in the development of your brand, your marketing, your business, all those different types of things. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. I really like that because I think it started from what you were saying about AI and also having the correct mindset, because whatever you believe will happen with AI is what's going to happen to your business. If you think AI is going to replace, it's going to, yeah, make your business fail. It will. If you think it's going to help your business, it will. And also, I think this reflects into what you said about business owners being unable to implement automations in their business because of like roadblocks from VAs and also because they're afraid of losing their job. But if everyone had this perspective of this will free up my time to do more valuable things, like you said, this could actually lead to a lot higher efficiency and a lot more useful um things to do with your time that isn't like just like scheduling calendar and writing emails, because I think that's not like what we're supposed to do with work, right? I feel like humans aren't meant to just reply to emails. That's just not a useful thing to do. And yeah, and
Mm,
I like that we're moving into the time where we don't need to just copy and paste something into a Google invite. Like, why should we be doing that?
absolutely.
As a first generation American, your journey to tech entrepreneurship is incredibly inspiring. What advice do you have for others, perhaps facing their own set of challenges, hesitating to take the leap into a tech driven venture?
So I interned in the Middle East back in, I think during my senior year. And I met a couple American expats when I was over there. And I was asking them a very similar question to this. Like, how do you know when you want to make a giant leap like this? And they told me there's always going to be a reason not to. And if you listen to those reasons, they're never going to stop. So in the context of the answer he gave, and then I'll tie it back to business, he said, some people think, oh, I don't want to move overseas until I get married. Then you get married. Okay, we want to settle down as a couple first. Okay, do that. Oh, we want to have a kid first. Okay, we want to let that kid figure out how to function as a human being. Let's figure out being new parents before move. Now he's in kindergarten. Now she's a preschooler. So there's just always going to be a reason not to do it until before you know it, you've completely blown your shot and missed out on a new opportunity. Within the business world, I found for my journey specifically, it was very similar. Like I, I had a dream once that I was in one of those quarterly meetings that every big corporation does. And every company does this. And I hate to say this. I hate I'm about to say this, but you have those meetings when some employee who's been working there for 20 and 25 and 30 years will walk up on stage and the CEO will thank them for 20, 25 something years of service. And this is not to disparage those individuals because this was a previous generation's method to success and it definitely worked for them. I'm not disparaging that in the slightest, but for myself, there's always been something to look forward to moving on down the line. I'm in grad school, can't wait to find my first job, can't wait to start my business, can't wait for that business to scale, etc. I had this dream that I was walking across that stage and the CEO thanked me for 25 years of service. And I woke up and realized, oh, okay, I'm still in my 20s. I'm still, okay, that was just a dream. Okay, cool. So as I thought through the direction my life was going, and I think like a couple of days after that dream, I realized I can, aside from an economic downturn or something, the challenge that every human has to deal with is it's both a luxury and a curse. And that is the consequences of your influence. I know people, again, in my corporate life, they were around my age and they would work animals from 9 to 5, 9 to 6. And then after work, they'd go home, they'd pop up Netflix, they'd watch it for 3 or 4 hours. At some point in there, they'd cook dinner, they'd go to bed, and then they would rinse and repeat. And that was their life. And I hung out with them a few times and I was depressed to the point of tears after seeing that more than a handful of times with more than a handful of people. And again, some people want to live life like that. That's fine. But I always have plans and goals and things I want to aspire to. And for myself, and this is a completely different conversation, is making sure that you're aligned with the right types of people. But as I reflected on that, I sat there and realized once you get into the job market, most things are equal. Yeah, maybe people will pat you on the back, go, oh, you went to Harvard, or you went to an Ivy League, or you went to this school or that school or whatever. And that's fine. You can schmooze it up at your alumni dinners and talk down to people that didn't go to nice schools or whatever. but everybody got to the same place. Like one of my best friends in my corporate job, she went to a completely different school than I did, like different part of the country, different major, different study, different graduating class. Like we had almost nothing in common academically, but we were at the same place at the same time. So the curse and luxury of influence is realizing how you spend your time now is going to dictate where you are in 5 years, in 10 years, in 20 years. And if you don't like where you are in 10, 20 years, then you have no one to blame but yourself. You can't blame the economy. You can't blame society. You can't blame the fact that you're single or married. You can't blame any of that stuff. It's like, how did I spend my time? Did I use it or did I not? And that's really what it all boils down to. So directly answering this question, I would say it's never going to be easy making these types of decisions, specifically to start a business. But as life goes on, it's never going to get easier. There's always going to be a bigger challenge. And for myself, again, I asked so many people for advice on whether I should quit or not. I got really good at predicting people's answers based off their demographic. Like my American friends would always tell me, "Oh, that's great. Yeah, go for it. You've always had that potential." And that's to a certain extent, that's just Americans being Americans. I love them. They have this spirit that I very seldom see in other parts of the world. And it's one of the things that's made America a hotbed for entrepreneurship. I would look at my international classmates from grad school and they would almost always tell me the complete opposite. They'd be like, "Oh, we're in a slump. COVID's happening. People getting fired. We're getting sent back to our home countries. Just be happy you have a job. Don't rock the boat. Play it safe. Wait for the whole pandemic to fizzle out and then think about starting your company." And for myself, the deciding factor, I met a guy who was basically in both camps. He had been raised in India and he was very successful in his career. And I asked him the same question. And this guy is normally a pretty joking guy. He's he's the kind of guy that will go to a cocktail party and he'll say the most outlandish political opinions and he'll defend them. And it was so funny to watch because he would normally like successfully defend them too. Like just off the wall stuff. And that's nobody can argue with this. And dang, it actually makes sense now that I think about it. But he got really serious with me and he said, "Mark, do not listen to your immigrant friends when it comes to facing this." And this is going to sound, this could get slightly controversial, what I'm about to say, but I'm just the messenger. He said, "There's a reason why people are flocking to America to manage and start their companies here. And that speaks volumes about this country. That speaks volumes about the environment that's here. That speaks volumes about the approach to failure that this country has. And you have an opportunity, you have the skills, you have the motivation, you're young, you're in your mid-20s, you're single. It's never going to get easier than it is right now. So do what you got to do, shoot your shot. And in 5 to 10 years, hire me as a VP because I'd love to work for you." And that conversation was the last thing I needed to hear. Like later that week, I handed in my resignation and I knew that day, I've never looked back on that decision. And I knew the moment I had that chat with my boss that it was the right one. So to summarize all of this, yeah, it's not going to be easy. It's going to test you in ways you did not think possible, but it'll be worth it in the end.
I love that because I think a lot of people are scared and they make excuses with everything that comes. Like COVID came, it's a recession, it's, oh, I need to get married first. I should probably settle down. And I feel like these excuses will never end. And it's honestly up to you. Like what you said, it's like our personal responsibility to choose what to do with our time and making the most of it at as early an age that we possibly can because it is easier
Mhm.
that way.
Mhm.
So to close up this
100%.
podcast with the final question. Yeah. To close up this podcast with the final question. Looking ahead, where do you see the future of AI and chatbots for small businesses? How can non technical founders prepare for and adapt to these changes to stay ahead?
Honestly, I've been to a lot of conferences about AI and all these types of things. And on one hand, I want to say the solutions just educate and look to implement all these types of things. I think even that might be a bit too vague because there are so many tools out there. I was at a conference in Texas about 6 to 8 months ago, and this guy, he had his team do a super comprehensive deep dive on the AI industry and all the new startups that had come up in the last 12 months. And he put all their logos on a spreadsheet, just a Google slide. And it was like one of those collages of you make a picture out of like really tiny pictures. There must have been hundreds, if not thousands of these companies on there. And someone in the space I could hire someone full time to just research technology tools and make recommendations and all those types of things. So, feature of AI on chatbots for small businesses is going to be the standard. I personally believe it's going to be like the telephone and the internet and calculators and all those types of things. This will become a tool that's everybody is using in some capacity. So, the sooner that people can do that, the better off they'll be. There is a buddy of mine. He works as a technology consultant for some pretty big firms here in the States. He's worked with a couple of DC based firms as well, working with the government. And he tells people for every week you delay learning about AI, that's a quarter of business that you're lagging behind your competitors who are using it properly. So I would say start out small. You don't need to master it all. You don't need to figure out every little nuance of AI and all these types of things, but start looking for one or two small tools. And they don't even need to be the right tools, just literally anything. I'm not going to name examples because that could get heated, but just pick a technology tool to start implementing in your business. Make it a goal, like one a month. That's probably too slow. One every 2 weeks, one a week, something like that. And as you see how these start to impact your business, you'll start to see the the compounding impact of these on your processes, on your systems, on the work being scaled, all those types of things. You'll figure out which ones work for you. You'll figure out which ones don't, but just start with small action items you want to take off your plate. You want to systematize all those types of things.
Absolutely. I really like that advice because a lot of people get overwhelmed by all these AI tools that are coming out, and picking just one a week and learning that is a very practical advice. Thank you so
Hmm.
much, Mark, for coming on the podcast today and sharing all of your tech insights and all your personal experiences that I'm sure will inspire our audience.
Pleasure, Panita. Thank you.
Thank you.